Okay, this is going to be a very powerful video. For anybody that is not aware of what a generational curse is, it's essentially a curse, or at least a pattern, if you want to think about it psychologically and not religiously. It's a pattern of behavior that has been passed down through your generations and through your family. So, for example, in Exodus 25, so 25, not 25, it says, "Thou shalt not bow down thyself to them, nor serve them. For I, the Lord thy God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children unto the third and fourth generation of them that hate me." So, what this is basically saying is that the sins of your family members and your ancestral line is going to influence your life, and it's going to be cemented into your state of being until you can break the generational curse. Well, how do you break the generational curse, you ask? Well, you have to understand what the sins are of your family. And so I want to go into further on the 7 deadly sins, and I want to go through one by one and then give certain ways to overcome these sins so that you can strive for a better life. What it really boils down to throughout all of the sins, especially the 7 deadly sins that you can commit, what it really boils down to is a lack of a lack of self-control and an overindulgence in impulse. So it's a lack of impulse control altogether. And so you have to ask yourself, whenever you do have something coming up in the spiritual warfare, which is part of breaking generational curses, you're going to have situations in your life where there are going to be times where you are tried, whether that is with any kind of sin. You're going to be tried, or the devil's going to try to tempt you to come back into that curse. And why is the temptation so powerful to go back into the curse? It's because, in a weird way, red flags are attractive. Like, there's this sense of danger to it. And as human beings, we're very curious creatures, and we like that sense of thrill and that sense of adventure. You know, for some people that have been in conditionally chaotic environments their whole life, especially if they've been around narcissists, or they've had narcissistic family members, or if they just don't even know what a healthy relationship even looks like, then they're going to be stuck in this sense of not even knowing what to even do to get out of the temptation. And so oftentimes they're going to have to see it acted out in a better way in order to understand it. But that's if they want to understand. That's if this person wants to understand and wants to reach for something higher. You know, that's part of the whole point of love in relationships, is that it gives freedom to choose. Now, what you choose in your relationship doesn't always equate to unconditional access to support or protection, right? So you can choose whatever you want, but if you choose sin, you're not going to get that kind of protection from God. And if you want to really think about it more psychologically, thinking about it from a behavioral and an analytical perspective, it's more a sense of what gets rewarded. So what kind of behaviors get rewarded, that is. In the past, maybe 3 or 4 generations before, your parents, in this case, your great-great-grandparents, were rewarded certain kinds of behaviors in their sins in some way, shape, or form. At least that's what they think. There was some kind of reward. There was some kind of dopamine hit to the brain. There was some kind of release of adrenaline. There's some kind of release of something, because that's really what temptation is about. Not everybody wants temptation. People want to release to the temptation. So you have to understand the root of whatever you are being tempted by. So with that being said, let's go further into the actual sins. So the first sin to overcome would be lust, which is essentially the unrestrained craving for sexual desire. Well, how do you get rid of this desire in some way, or how do you not repress it or accept it for what it is? How do you accept this, and how, if you have had a lot of lust in your past, what do you do now? Well, if you're a male, you get on semen retention, number one. Number two, if you're a female, you absolutely must be celibate. You have to be celibate to some degree, no matter what gender you are, because actually, because like you can be in a relationship and be lustful, but I think you can be in a relationship and still heal from the lust, even though you may be participating in sexual activities with your husband or wife or boyfriend or girlfriend, whatever it is that you are in a relationship with. Again, I'm not advocating for that kind of behavior, but in the Corinthians, it does say that marriage is sex, so keep that in mind. But you have to be pure, basically. That is the essential antidote to lust, is to be pure. And you do that by being active in different ways. This may be working out. This may be going for a hike, spending more time in nature, something to get yourself staying active and transmuting that sexual energy in a different way, and also dressing a certain way as well. Like, a lot of the times, if you are dressing to be seen, if you are desperate to be seen, which a lot of females in modern day times are desperate to be seen, men seem to have just accepted that, at least like a lot of average men seem to just accept that they're not going to be seen. But it's so funny how average women, when they don't get seen, it's like they have a panic attack, you know? And so, and that's due to a lot of social media, but men lust in a different way. Men are also, I would say, the real scoundrels when it comes to lust, because men are the ones that provoke something in some way, shape, or form, whereas the women are more kind of luring you in. The men are like the pushers and the women are the pullers. So the women can pull all they want, but if there's not a pusher per se, then they're not going to get very far. The second to look out for is gluttony. Now, if you have a lot of generational curses where maybe your family has not been the most healthy, and I would actually argue that children that are overweight is actually a form of child abuse, and I know that because I was never really overweight when I was growing up until about 17, but when I turned 18 to like 22, 23, that was when I had gained like 50 pounds, and I've obviously lost that now, but when I was fat, and I was really fat, a lot of that came from seeing the patterns of my household growing up. I mean, I remember hearing stories from my mother about her parents and what they told her and the way that they behaved with gluttony, with their gluttonous decisions. I remember my mom telling me a story about her mom and how they made a bunch of cookies one day, and they had a bunch of cookies on the weekend, and all the children could have one cookie, but the mom had like all of the cookies that were left. And my mom told her that she was upset at her mom my grandma, and she was upset because they wanted more cookies, and she felt like the mom was being very selfish. And my mom's mom told her as a child that when she's older, she can make these decisions to eat as many cookies as she wants. But now she only gets one. Now, my family history, they were very gluttonous. Let's just say that. They were very gluttonous. But it didn't really even start until they were older. And I didn't even know the root of that particular sin until I got older, and I realized in retrospect, like, holy cow. Yeah, I was falling into that same pattern of like, okay, now that I'm adult, I can eat whatever I want. I can eat ice cream. I can eat pizza. I can do this. But just because you can do something doesn't always mean you should or you ought to, right? Number 3 is pride. The third sin, pride. Now, this is obviously an inflation of one's own self-importance to some degree. And one way that you can do this is to be modest about your accomplishments, still be in, like, have high self-esteem for what you've done and what you've accomplished. But what you really need at this point is God. You need God and the Most High, so that you understand how to humble yourself. Because if you have an overinflation of your ego and your pride is getting in the way, in the Bible it says, pride cometh before a fall. So your pride will stop you from getting what you want sometimes. And sometimes even getting what you deserve. Sometimes you deserve certain things, but your pride gets in the way. And so if you have a family that comes from a lot of prideful backgrounds, there's going to be, like, if there's a particular wealthy situation, or if there's like this piece of land that your family has, but you are not going to, like you have an inheritance, let's say, and you are prideful about that inheritance, even though you had no business, like you had nothing to do with it. You had nothing to do with what your ancestors did before you to get that land, and now it's yours, but you didn't have to work for it. And now you're over excessively pride about it. You might lose it. And I know it because I've seen that happen. The 4th is sloth. So this is essentially just a lack of discipline, really. Again, you can do this, you can solve this by working out, you can solve this by understanding that you are not doing as much as you can do. And I know for me, this was playing video games, just for my situation. I'm not saying you shouldn't play video games, but for me, video games was something that really held me back from my fullest potential. And also, I didn't want to do the work for the longest time. I didn't want to do the work until about 3 years ago was when I guess 4 years ago was when I started to get serious about spirituality. But it was about 3 years ago when I started to get serious more about my life goals. And so when I actually got serious about it and I actually started putting in the work, I noticed that my confidence was growing, and I noticed that I didn't even want to be lazy anymore. And this is something that the doctor, I don't know if he's technically a doctor, but Andrew Huberman, I think his name is, he says testosterone actually makes effort feel good. So this is one of the reasons why men with ambition is so important, is because when you are a man with ambition, the testosterone that you have in your body, especially if you're doing semen retention, that's going to go up as well, because you're not just releasing it all the time. But your testosterone is going to improve, And that's going to make the things that you're doing more effortless because you have more energy. And then the things that you do get done, it's going to make you feel accomplished about it. There's that sense of feeling of accomplishment that you get from discipline that is just, it's very profound. It's very profound. Like today at the gym, I did not want to do leg day. I did not want to do leg day. I never really do want to do leg day. But I like doing the hard leg day stuff. I like doing the Frankenstein squats. I like doing the step-ups with the bar on my back. I like doing those kinds of harder squats and harder leg lifts and everything like that because it makes me feel as though I'm doing something that is really working my body, even though it sucks. But when I was doing those, something I just told myself was, who is going to make it? Who is going to make it? And that's what I was saying to myself as I was doing these squats. And you just have to have that kind of mentality to have that discipline. Number 5 is wrath. So if you've been in narcissistic relationships of any kind, you've likely experienced the narcissistic rage at some point, and it is a frightening thing to witness. Believe me, I've seen it. It's like, boom, night and day. The narcissist is, happy-go-lucky, and then you say something that accidentally triggers them, and ooh, man, you do not want to be around when that happens. Now, there's a difference between like an angry, disciplinary action and wrath. So wrath is almost like an uncontrolled anger where you can't really monitor your own emotions. And make no mistake, wrath is something that was never really prevalent in my generational curses, but it was there. Like all of these sins are in our generational curses in some way. It's just a matter of the degree. Like even with people that I've done consultations with, it's a matter of like how much the pendulum swings to certain ones on each family member or on each person involved in that family as well. Number 6 is greed. So this is the materialistic thing, excessive wanting for material desires or material things. But one way that you can counter this, I also forgot to mention one way you can counter wrath. The way that you can counter wrath is with meditation and also with time and patience. Tolstoy said that time and patience are the most powerful warriors of all, and I hold that to be true. But going back to greed, one way that you can get rid of this generational curse is learn how to give. If you have a lot of greed, you have to learn how to donate your time or your services to some degree. It's basically be charitable in one way or another. And then finally, the 7th is envy, which is jealousy towards another person's or another group of people's joy. Now, remember in the beginning where in Exodus, that 25 verse, it says, "Thou shalt not bow down thyself to them, nor serve them, for I, the Lord thy God, am a jealous God." Now, why does God declare himself to be jealous? And if envy is a deadly sin, which is essentially a jealousy of other people or a group of people's joy, why is God, the most supposedly merciful being or thing or whatever kind of concept you have of God, why is jealousy something that God declares himself to be. That's very strange, isn't it? Well, really, it comes down to God being unconscious of himself in one way or another. And his hope to realize himself is through this jealousy, by you acknowledging the sin, and in your acknowledgement of the sin and establishing the root of the sin, specifically jealous or envy in this point, you will overcome envy. And in your overcoming of envy, you'll be forgiven by God. So God's also conscious of the forgiveness and the mercy, but God is also unconscious of the jealousy in his being. That's a very strange thing. That's a very strange way to think about it. But I would say, psychologically speaking, for the most part, I think it's a pretty solid idea, and I have hammered it pretty heavily with that philosophical hammer that Friedrich Nietzsche talks about. And I don't really see a way to break it down any other way. I'm sure there will be somebody in the comments that disagrees, but I really don't think that it's possible to think about it any other way. But the way you overcome this envy and the way that God forgives you is by gratitude. Gratitude is where we should get our joy. Why? Because gratitude is a byproduct, or joy is a byproduct of gratitude. That's why you should get joy from gratitude. You don't have to, but it's going to be a byproduct of gratitude. So I hope this message was insightful and useful to a lot of different kinds of people out there, specifically anybody that is aware of the toxicness in their family or in their friend group or at work or whatever, wherever you are in your situation, at the gym or whatever you are doing and dealing with. I pray for you, and I also pray for you to have the ability to discern what to do in these situations. And if anybody's interested in a consultation with me, I have a description in the link below with my email at regalchange@gmail.com. You can send me a message there. And also, if you want to support content like this, the best way to do that is to either like, comment, or subscribe to the channel. And I'm hoping to make it to 5,000 subscribers within the next couple months or so, if not less. And I just want to be able to get the message out. I think that these kinds of topics are things that people need to hear about, especially because I'm trying to bridge the gap between psychology, religion, and practical rationality and stoicism, and how we can integrate all of that into our lives to live a complete and whole life. So, peace be with you. Till next time.